Okay. Hello, Gabrielle Bridgewater. It is a pleasure to have you on with me today. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Joshua. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you so much. I appreciate the warm welcome, and it is indeed a pleasure to be here with you today as well.
Yeah. Great, great. Could you just introduce yourself to our audience a little bit?
Okay, great. So I am Gabrielle Bridgewater, as mentioned. I
Great.
am 30 years of age. I am from Trinidad and Tobago. And a little bit about myself. I am a police officer. I still completing my studies, so I'm still a student. I am, very much interested in the economy, criminology, these kind of things. These things interest me. I also enjoy in my hobbies, in my little pastimes, I enjoy going to the beach, like any regular person, regular
I mean,
activities, hanging out.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I totally miss the beach life. Let me say, I can't wait to come back to Trinidad this summer. I know you also do some charity work on the ground in with St. Anthony's Church. Tell me about
Yes.
that
So
a
I'm
little bit.
Yeah, so I'm also involved in my parish community here back at home in Trinidad, and I am actually one of the catechists. So I assist with teaching confirmation, passing on the faith to these young people. I'm also the head altar server, so we assist like the priests as it relates to mass celebrations, and so during the mass, we're there to assist. I'm part of the events committee at the parish, so we plan events for the parish in terms of dinners, any upcoming functions, anything like that. So as it relates to the St. Anthony's Parish, I am so much heavily involved.
Yeah.
I sometimes you can't catch a break, right? But it's all for God, you're doing God's work. So that I also enjoy that as well.
Yeah. And could you, that's great. I mean, I know a lot of people also, and you know that,
Yeah.
we're working, with in our parish and the work that they do on the ground in terms of community engagement. And,
Yes.
you're sort of like this first line of contact with a lot of like the social ills, let's say, and you're trying to
Yeah.
deal with that and you're trying to let's say manage them and just make Trinidad a better place. And I think this is what these conversations are about, right? It's like I want to know like what is going on and how can we essentially make Trinidad a better place. And
Yeah,
also like
indeed.
and tell me a little bit about also your work with the police service.
Okay, so here at the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, I'm a police constable. I would have written both my corporal and sergeant exams, of which I was successful. So I'm just literally just waiting to be promoted to the higher rank. At the police service, of course, we treat with responding to reports,
Right.
interacting with the public, persons who may face, different issues. Because sometimes on a daily basis, you interact with so many different people who have so many different problems. And so everything is always different. No two reports are ever the same. The situation, the circumstances is just totally different. So, I interact with these persons. Sometimes we're on the field, you're actually going out there looking to assist persons, whether it might be something as small as an accident, persons who may apprehend fear for whatever reason. Sometimes out there looking to see if we could eradicate, marijuana fields, like these kind of things. Because of course, in Trinidad and Tobago, they only recently legalized like a little bit, there's a limit so that it's still an offense if you're found with, over the limit, of course. So we look at those areas. I'm also part of the administrative section where we, treat with the more like the human resource aspect of the staff.
Hmm.
We try to ensure that staff is well allocated, and so we manage the day-to-day run-ins of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, sorry. And I'm also part of that team, if you want to say team.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, my work in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and let's not forget, as is so stressful at times. However, once you find joy in doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
then it becomes so much easier. And sometimes you're so happy to assist persons because, when persons come to you with an issue, you just want to be happy to provide that level of customer satisfaction and that these persons get, exactly what they're looking for. So it's really a pleasure, while you assist persons, based on, whatever situation that they may be experiencing whenever they approach you.
Yeah. I mean, also too, I know you're going through an administrative change, with the change in government from the previous P&M administration, now with the UNC administration. And also too, there's been a change in the top cop position from the previous
Yes.
top cop, and now you have a new top cop.
Yes.
Have you like noticed any sort of vibe shift at the police service with that change, or what would you say?
Well, as it relates to the switch with the government, I would say, the politics, they wouldn't like directly play like an obvious role in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. It's like, they're there, the different parties, they're in charge. So they basically have the say as to, once they debate who's going to be the next top cop, that kind of thing, once they follow the usual channel and procedures. However, as it relates to the top cop, actually, having that new person. I mean, this one is only like a week, 2 weeks old. So that we haven't really, he hasn't really got his feet wet just yet to say that we have experienced his, his leadership style and all these different aspects of it. However, I would say that with the previous commissioners, when you look down the line as to from one commissioner to the other, I mean, I would have been present for at least 5 different commissioners. Yeah. And so you're able to see the change in the leadership style. However, when you look at the common goal, they're all interested in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, functioning at a top level. Everybody has the different approaches, of course. So, your focus or the way in which one person would have, tried to, provide this quality service through the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is different.
Right.
It's so different. However, keeping in mind the main aim is to serve the members of the public and provide that, that whatever they're looking for as it relates to their situation at hand. Different commissioners may have a more robust approach, while others may be a little bit more reserved, so that you're able to see the difference in the leadership. And however, as I said, all maintaining the same goal. So with this new commissioner, we look forward to see, okay, what does he have to offer? Of course, we're there to support him fully, so that we ensure that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service continues to function at top level, providing that quality level of service and professionalism,
Right.
as you said that we would provide to the members
Yeah.
of the public. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's, as you kind of said, it's too early to kind of tell what his,
Yeah.
because he's only there for 2 weeks.
Almost 2 weeks. Yeah. Almost 2 weeks.
Okay. Wow. So a lot of changes happening. I mean, just to dig a little deeper on that, I mean, there are two kind of issues in Trinidad that people are talking about a lot with regard to policy, policing policy. One of them, is what they were talking about was replicating the Florida stand your ground law, which essentially allows Trinidadians to shoot home invaders that come into your house and making guns more available to the public. Do you think that that would be effective, or is that something like what is the thinking process in the police commission, police service regarding that proposal by the current administration? I'm genuinely curious about that.
I would say, based on that, I mean, this is something that you really need to take into account because there's a use of force policy in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service where, you can't just simply just go get a gun, pick up a gun, and just feel like, okay, there's a procedure in which you must obtain a firearm. Yeah.
Right.
And so, as it relates to the use of force policies, a lot of persons think that, okay, somebody comes into my home, they've invaded, it comes in. If I had a firearm, I just shoot behind them. But that's crazy, because
Yeah.
what they look at is the force that is being returned to you. So, for example, let's say somebody comes into your home, the home invasion, as you would say, they comes into your property, trying to see something. But what if they're not armed?
Right.
And so they just come, with anything. But you at the same time, you're saying he has no right to be in my property. But the
Right.
fact that you have a firearm and you decide, okay, let me go shoot behind him or that kind of thing, is almost like unequal force. And the use of force policy speaks about, you returning the same level of force that this person is going to apply, once your life is in immediate danger or the life of somebody else is in immediate danger, so that if a firearm is being pointed to you, you would be justified that, okay, I would have returned, the same force. So as it is a stand your ground, I mean, a lot of business owners, you know, they apply for the firearm to protect their businesses and protect themselves. And, you know, this is all well and good, but I think it's something that we really need to take into an account, that you don't just want guns being out there, because sometimes even as a police officer, you may be faced with a situation, and you know you need to be able to hold yourself together, and not because you have a fire means that you're just gonna take it out and
Yeah.
and you know just go shooting like crazy, you know. So I'm thinking that this whole stand your ground thing, as you mentioned, I'm thinking that this is something that the Trinidad and Tobago police, they need to, you know, they're looking into it closely, because you don't just want to have a lot of guns out there with persons who just get excited and they go off doing stuff, you know, that they will regret later, you know, based on their actions. So that, yeah, that's just how
Yeah, I mean, it's controversial, definitely. And
very
on social media, in the comment section on various newspapers, you see that there is a very active and charged discussion on this particular policy. And you would be, as an officer, putting yourself, I mean, your life is in danger often. So
very often.
how do you deal with that psychologically, on a spiritual level, on an emotional level? How do you deal with that risk, your life constantly being in danger?
Definitely is. What came to my mind was just God. You know, like you just have to keep praying. You just have to keep praying and ask God to cover you, you know, because, you know, some people look at me and they say, you know, you have like, it's like a total switch. It's like you wear
Yeah.
two different caps, you know, one minute you're all involved in the church and that kind of thing, and then the next minute you're out there. So it's really, you know, psychologically, for me, the church provides that safe place so that it really, you know, allows you to just take a step back. And sometimes being involved in the Trinidad and Tobago police service, if you're not careful and, you know, sometimes you're out there, you're faced with so many unethical, you know, things happening around you. So many persons, not even like just the general public, you know, people who might engage in corrupt practices. And
Mhm.
so, you know, you need some form of balance then to, you just need some form of, you hearing me?
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what
that's
happened
okay.
there. So you just need that form of balance to really, you know, allow yourself to not get so caught up in the Trinidad and Tobago police service and, you know, the society and the public and that kind of thing. You know, mentally, as I said, church being a safe place, sometimes I would go there, you know,
Mhm.
you pray about whatever situation you may face. You know, sometimes you just really need to take a break away from that robust, you know, approach as it relates to the organization,
Yeah.
and just, you know, just take a step back to allow yourself not to get too caught up, you know, with the day-to-day operations.
Yeah. I mean, I think like a next question would be like, why? Why are you doing this? Why are you in the police service? What made you decide that this was a good idea to put yourself in harm's way?
The funny thing is, you would not believe how I actually, and I always tell people, like, I actually became a police officer. I play netball. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love netball. So I've been playing netball, and, you know, the coach at the time, she was a civilian, not a police officer. She
Mhm.
was actually, she's going to have a baby. And so she asked a police officer friend who she knows plays netball to actually take over the team for her, you know, while she's on her maternity leave and that kind of thing. And the lady who took over, she was a police officer, of course, training and doing the coaching and all of that. And so they was like, hey, you know, you're all so young, like, why not join each other and Tobago Police Service? So, you know,
Okay.
me at that tender age, I was like 17 at the time.
Yeah.
And I was actually working at the bank. I was working in First Citizens Bank in Independent, the credit card center then.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I'm sitting there and I'm faced with this choice and I'm like, you know, being a young cop, 17, 18 is like, you know, so much power behind it, you know, maybe I should join, you know. And so, you know, I went through the process, I applied, I, you know, did the necessary. And then I was just sitting in work it was literally a Friday, and they called me and they were like, hey, you applied and now training begins. It was so quick. Training begins
Yeah.
on Monday. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm now faced with a decision. Like, am I just gonna quit? You know, I don't want to just come across like you just came across so abrupt to your present employers that, you know,
Yeah.
you just leaving, that kind of thing. And it was there and that, like just over that weekend, I had to make the choice. Do I go back to the bank on Monday or do I report for training? You know?
Right.
But having made that decision, I mean, the bank was an awesome place to work, wonderful staff and that kind of thing. You really felt that love and everybody coming together, like a team.
Yeah.
However, I don't regret joining the police service because I also feel, that level of comfort and that kind of thing there as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how it all started. There wasn't any grand story. Like I always wanted to be a cop.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But was it like your work with your philanthropy? Did that come as a result of the psychological and emotional challenges from your work at the police service, or was that like a separate thing and then it played a support role? How did that happen?
Well, I think it was always there.
Yeah.
But as I joined the service, I began to realize how much more I needed to rely on it, to provide that support. So it was always there, but it just increased then, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, I mean that's intense. Okay, so here's a question, right? Like just to get more into the crime situation in Trinidad and your
Right.
first hand experience,
Yeah.
like how does the lack of like let's say police presence in underserved communities contribute to this crime related, I know, economic losses and loss of life and
Yeah.
whatnot?
Well, the thing about it in the various communities, the high levels of crime, it definitely has like a major role to play
Yeah,
because, simple things like these business owners, some of them are so fearful because, you never know what may occur. This the high levels of crime, especially in, certain areas. And so what they would do is that they would invest more in like surveillance and, security and that kind of thing. So instead of channeling their money towards, probably going back into the business and, definitely, getting their returns, they have to focus more on the security aspect, as it relates to these persons. Sometimes the customers, they don't even want to go into that particular area because they know that, okay, there's high levels of crime, there's a high chance of me getting, robbed or some kind of thing taking place so that they try to avoid these
yeah,
areas at all costs, and once they start doing that now on an economic level, then you get to see that, okay, people don't want to invest, they don't want to, even persons who, like homeowners, people who rent, like these people who rent apartments to persons and that kind of thing. They too incur a loss. And, of course, all of that is business because I'm not gonna come to rent by somebody where I know, okay, in this area is a high chance of me gonna get robbed, you know, or they probably steal my vehicle. 'Cause remember, there are different types of crimes, of course, so that you never know which one you may face, So it's more like a fear and a challenge for most persons. They don't want to venture into these areas so that business won't be booming, as you would say, in these areas because they try to avoid it so as to avoid being a victim.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a loss of investment. Like just a personal story,
Absolutely.
I have two personal stories. My mother, I won't name the establishment she works at or her name, but she has been, I think, held at gunpoint 10,
Right.
10 plus times in the place that she
Wow.
works. So quite
That
a
is so
like
interesting.
right. So I mean, this is something that affects, people in Trinidad in the business sector. I mean, it's not, I don't want to paint Trinidad too much for a bad picture of the beautiful parts, but like, crime is a problem in a lot of cases, something that we need to deal with. And kind of like what you were talking about, how businesses have to now invest in securing their
Yeah.
establishment. So I think like millions of dollars, I suspect, has been spent on making that establishment that she works in into essentially a fortress in some regards. But of course, like I believe my mother has been psychologically damaged, and then of course you have the business itself, um, being at a significant loss in financial resources that have to be directed towards security itself. So
Yeah.
we know that we need a lot more police presence in a lot of areas all over Trinidad. I mean, with regard to this, like this underserved communities, I know also there's this issue of violence within school communities, within the school itself, and the current government is looking at, I don't know if it'll be effective, but they're looking at essentially, you know, charging the parents of children for the conduct of the children in schools, as well
Yes.
as, having police officers stationed in the schools themselves. And then also having, you know, the children charged as criminals for these fights. Do you think this is part of the solution, or do we need a more holistic approach? Why is it that schools have become centers of, crime-related activity?
I think there's a relationship then. This is something that you need to go hand in hand with the parents, with, different organizations or different groups need to play an active role in the lives of these students who, from these schools. Because the thing is, I mean, they came up, as you mentioned, they mentioned, charging the persons, of course. It's my personal belief that I think persons should be held accountable for their actions. And unless you take like a firm stance as it relates to, these prevalent things that are happening in the schools, then the kids are going to keep doing it and getting away with it. And it's so crazy, it's so much violence and so much hatred and things that you're seeing being bred in these schools. So that says to me that there's a need for intervention, not just from, the teachers or just the police, because, you could put the police in the schools. And my belief is sometimes people think that you might just deal with something on a surface level, but you need to actually get down inside. What is the root causes? What is causing these students to behave like that? And how can we now assist them so as to prevent these kind of things from reoccurring? And I think that by the intervention from whether it's a church group, whether it's just the families, everybody needs to play an important role so as to shape and mold these students so that they don't engage in these kind of activities.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, it's
But like,
unfortunate. Yeah.
but why is that happening? Like, what would you say are the reasons for this outbreak of violence in the schools? Why do
In
we
these
need to have
schools,
an intervention?
I think in these schools, you can see that it's happening based on different things. So, like, for example, I think social media, of course, has like a major part to play. It's very influential. These kids, they go online, they go on TikTok, or sometimes they see, something happens. Sometimes it's the music that they're listening to, music
Glorifying
plays.
violence.
Yes. And so when they hear these things, they feel as they want to enact it and they want to go there, they want to lash out, somebody's, probably offend them. They do something small, it doesn't even have to be anything grand, and then they immediately lash out and they want to react based on what they know, based on the media, the music, is all a show. They want to display a certain kind of behavior so that, they are perceived, as, high and mighty and they're in charge of the situation, that kind of thing. Right. So, um, most times as it relates to the school violence is always along that level. So you can't say like, okay, then I wouldn't say that you can't say, but the chances of it being that they feel like, like poverty or anything has like a part to play in it because believe you me, most of these kids, I mean, we understand that not everybody, of course, is on the same level, but most of them, even if it is the parents unable to provide it, the school also provides a support system, charitable organizations, so that they're well equipped with what it is they need, the essentials, then, for school on a daily basis. So, most times poverty doesn't really have a part to play to say that, okay, they're lacking something so that they get violent because they're trying to steal something. Most times it's always, like small, like petty stuff that cause them to behave in such a manner, that they lash out and want to, as I said, enact what it is they're hearing and seeing as it relates to the media and, music and that kind of thing.
And
So,
competition.
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So, like, would you say that like the police service is understaffed to deal with a lot of these issues, or do you have enough officers on the ground?
I think we have enough officers on the ground, however, they lack the other resources. So sometimes, the lack of resources then plays a major role because sometimes you might want to respond to something, but then you only have one vehicle. And then what if 10 people are having an issue at the same time? Because everybody, the division in which the different police stations cover is not like small, it's very wide. Yeah. So that at one given point in time, you may have 5 different people who brought it to the attention of the police that, they may be facing this challenge or this is taking place here. But then when you have a lack of resources, lack of vehicles and these kind of things, in order to be able to respond, and then as it relates to manpower, sometimes you may have, they have allocated persons to different stations, that kind of thing. You have people, but then when officers might be sick, some persons don't show up for the day, that kind of thing. It really cuts back now on the labor supply that we actually could, go out there and treat with situations and that kind of thing. But, the
Yeah.
police, they're always hiring and, they're always open to applicants, persons, training and that kind of thing, so that there are always officers coming out. So as fast as you have 10 officers retire, you have 20 coming back in,
Right.
so that there's always that constant flow of
And
officers throughout the organization.
yeah, and I know also you have this like this shift work in the police service, the regular
Yeah.
hours, and how does it affect you, your work-life balance and productivity within the TTPS as a whole? And
Listen,
how does the TTPS support mental health and well-being of its officers? I think this is important. Your mental health being on the line, your life
yeah.
being on the line. Like, talk to me about that.
Listen, it is crazy. These hours are crazy because you could come to work and you have to work for 24 hours. 24 hours. I mean, you get like a little break in between, but it's literally like a small break. It's not, so to have somebody function for 24 hours straight, that is just, it's a lot because, and then the thing is, so many people coming in. So you face it so many, like a variety of situations. Sometimes you might deal with rape victims, people who are victims of domestic violence, somebody who just got robbed, lastly of their motor vehicle. Sometimes it could be a land dispute, people, and the thing is, people in Trinidad, they come to the station for everything, for any little thing, anything.
Yes.
If somebody's dog is barking too hard, I'm gonna go by the police. Let me tell them that, my neighbor needs to control his, that's
Yeah.
just to show you how, how they come for everything, everything. And
Yeah.
so mentally, it becomes, is a challenge because sometimes, you have to show this emotional support to the customers. You need to be there because remember when they come to you, they're not coming and say, oh, they might be short staff or they might be a lack of vehicles. They come in with their issue and they want to get some form of assistance from you. They want to be able to say that, okay, the police assisted me and, everything is settled, that kind of thing. So they're just coming with the approach that they just want results.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when you treat with five different people who, time they explain their situation to you and you empathize with them and, you get an understanding of what is taking place. You need to sometimes just detox yourself from all of these, different things that's going on around you. And so the police service they would have provided, they have social workers, they have, the counselors, they have all of these different persons who are set up in each station where, they're able to provide that assistance. So for example, you may be faced with something, you could always go to the social work unit and have a conversation with this person, the counselor, the social worker, who might be able to, make recommendations to tell you, okay, maybe you just need to take a break or, how, what are you doing to overcome, this stress and the work-life thing. Once you get caught up in work, sometimes, like, I would give you an example. So let's say I come to work today and I said, okay, 5 o'clock this afternoon, I just want to go to the mall, I want to do some shopping, or I just want to, just do something personal then, probably just go hang out a bit, take a break. And let's say 4 o'clock, somebody would come into the station, officer, I need some assistance, I have a problem. And sometimes that problem that they explain to you could take you past 9 o'clock in the night. And you're just there. And sometimes you make plans with friends, you make plans with family members, and you just have to cancel the plans. You don't really have a choice because I can't tell the person, well, okay, it's time for me to go. It's 9. I plan on leaving since 5 and just just go. You can't do that, because they're expecting a level of professionalism and response from you, so that sometimes things don't always go as planned. So sometimes your family members, you need to be so understanding. So definitely I can't go getting a partner who does not understand, the importance of
This
my job
balance.
and this balance. Yeah. So you need to have an understanding, family understanding, partner, anybody who you interact with, they
Yeah.
just need to be able to, yeah, and so
Whew. It
as I
sounds like
said,
it sounds like an intense job, especially with the work hours. Like how many hours a week would you say that you pull at the TTPS?
okay, so basic you're supposed to be working at least 40.
Mhm.
But if you really calculate it, I
Mhm.
would say sometimes you could find yourself working 80 hours a week, like twice times that, because like, just last night I was working and I was supposed to leave since 4 o'clock, just as I mentioned to you. And I was supposed to leave since 4. And then you had an issue here, you know, a lady came and she said she lost her cell phone. And so I was like, okay. But what I usually do, I like to put myself in the person's situation, right? So that if I were the one to lose the cell phone, I would know the kind of assistance that I would want somebody to provide for me. Because, you know, most times your cell phones, they have like all the information, you know, their contacts, and you don't want to just go losing that, especially if the files are not backed up. So, you know, she came in and she said, you know, officer, I was traveling and I left my phone in the vehicle and that kind of thing. And, you know, she showed that she left it there. And I got home like at 1 a.m. this morning, trying to assist this lady with finding her phone because we had to go, you know, make checks, trace everywhere she went, look for the taxi driver, view footage. And, you know, it takes so much time. So that from me just leaving work at 4, probably working like a regular 8 hours, you know, that took me an extra 8 hours again.
Oof. Yeah.
To, you know, assist her. So whatever plans I had, I mean, that definitely was canceled
Yeah.
because, you know, so the hours is a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot,
Yeah.
I mean, just to
Yeah.
get back on the topic of, you know, what influences crime rates a lot, I think something that comes to my mind is unemployment and the rate of unemployment. Talk to me about that and how that influences the crime rate in Trinidad.
So the thing about unemployment is that, you know, this is definitely an economic issue where you have the persons, there's a group of persons who just don't want to work, you know? And so once they don't want to work, they're expecting things to come to them easily.
Right.
And that is the issue. But sometimes now you have persons who may be working, but they may not be able to afford a particular lifestyle that they desire. And so when you think about the economy and you think about criminology, there's a theory called the strain theory. So what this theory basically says is that, you know, the persons, they want to acquire a certain kind of, you know, let's say a brand name stuff, you know, something that they want to acquire and they don't have the funds to do that.
Yeah.
So
You
then
know, we would call this like they want to peacock, you know, peacock in.
if you, yeah. Yeah, so let's say that, they want to peacock, yeah. But they don't have the funds to peacock so that they, you know, they resort to crime. So, you know, even the rational choice there, you know, they have the choice. They, you know, they just there, they said, you know what, I need to get this. So that they go, they commit crimes, they rob, you know, they monitor persons in communities to see what time is this person leaving. So, okay, he usually leaves to work at 8 so that they know, okay, he comes back. So they monitor persons' routines. You know, that's like with the routine activities theory. So when they study criminology, there's so many theories that they could apply, you know, as it relates to unemployment, crime rates, and that kind of thing happening. So they look at your routine, they know that, okay, Josh is going to work now. He's not going to come back until 9 tonight. So I have to operate between these time constraints. And then, you know, the police patrols may not pass until tonight or whatever. You know, they look at, they sit down, and trust me, they sit down and they really analyze the whole thing, you know, and, you know, they don't want to work to achieve what they want through the honest means. And then even like the unemployment, you could even look at the poverty levels as well. Because in certain areas, you have high levels of poverty, very high levels of poverty. So that these individuals, and most times when you look at the age group, is usually like, based on the statistics, is usually between 15 and 35, you know, around there. Not
We have
saying that
this we have this saying that the most dangerous animal in the world is a boy between the ages of 16 and 26 years of age.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe that's true.
Yeah, but the thing is, you know, like you're not just excluding the persons outside of the age category, of course, but you know, you realize that the statistics has shown that these are the groups of persons who are committing these offenses. So they're unemployed, right? They may be facing high levels of poverty because, you know, nobody's working and that kind of thing. And so this now, what they wanting to achieve what they want and they can't afford it, it causes them to commit violent acts, crimes. And the thing is, the unemployment, many of them are just going to join gangs. And there's a lot of violence and gang-related activities. And, you know, many times, you know, you see them on the block, they're linemen there, you know, they don't want to work, but they're getting a job there then. They don't want to work, you know, lawful means and obtain finances, you know, legally. They resort to joining these gangs because they feel like it's a quick turnover. I join the gang, I do this, I get this money, and I'm able to achieve what I want, to live the peacock life. And so by doing this now, they put in, the stress and the thing about it is that even as we speak about the gang violence and of course there's a lot of drugs and guns and this kind of thing, it's all so closely connected when you look at it, right? And where Trinidad is actually situated, like the drugs usually move from the South Americas coming up. Yeah, so it passes Venezuela and it's coming up to these small islands. And with Trinidad actually being, kind of like right in the middle of all of that activity taking place there, you know, it's kind of hard to get out of it. So that this kind of activity taking place, there's a facility for it. And so once these gang members and these people all involved and they have the younger ones coming up who unemployed now, they're giving them jobs, as they would say, to probably be like a corner boy, go selling drugs for them. Or, then of course it moves on to the guns. And then that's when you get, these more activities where there's shootings and all of these different things taking place. Persons who want to protect their turf, like you hear about these things internationally, and it's so unfortunate that, this thing of unemployment and you have like a lot of dropouts from school as well. So when they drop out from school, they don't have like a proper education to give them a good foundation to actually obtain employment, so they resort to this. So
Crime.
right.
What is the role here? So would you say then like CPEP and URP are absolutely essential programs in tempering the crime rates in Trinidad?
I would say that it has proven to provide a form of relief, in terms of getting some of them involved in the community. Because I mean, sometimes you pass and you see them, they work so hard. The sun is hot, it is crazy. You see them out there, they're on the road, they're working. And so while there's always good, there's always somebody with another agenda. And so sometimes you will hear about ghost gangs, they call it. So for example, you'd have members of the community who they sign up for the unemployment relief program. And so they're supposed to be doing work and that kind of thing. But it's actually nobody working, and some people actually just collecting a salary and that kind of thing. So they always look for some way to
Yeah.
how engage in corruption and corrupt practices,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, it has its pros and its cons. It would have provided, but yet at the same time, persons using it for another agenda,
Yeah. So it's this balance that we have to strike.
Yeah.
So just to go more a little bit further in that direction about the state of the police service and these different programs, like I think the first step would be kind of saying to what extent does like political influence affect recruitment and promotions in the service?
So the thing about it, like just to apply to come insurance, make a police service. I mean, it's simple. Like you just go online and you apply and you go through the training. So that the political aspect of it, it doesn't really affect like the lower ranks.
Yeah.
However, when you look at the higher ranks, for example, the deputy commissioner of police, so there's three spaces for that, and then there's the commissioner of police. You know, um, when you look at those levels, there is the political aspect of it that you can look at because these these um these ranks then they require it to be passed in parliament where they go through the parliament and they would make selections based on the candidates available and that kind of thing. And of course the government in power would have the say once they debate, you'll hear all the different issues being raised. They would debate on the different issues as these persons and their qualifications and their level of experience and that kind of thing. So there is the political part of it, at that level because
Yeah.
it must be they must be selected, you know, via the parliament. However, there's also the Police Service Commission to ensure that there's fairness, so that once the Police Service Commission basically oversees the selection process as it relates to the
The
selection of
recruitment.
the deputy, recruitment for the senior ranks, mostly in the senior ranks.
So you would say like the politicization of this process, you would say that is a problem that's affecting the morale of police service members?
The police service members, most persons, at least sometimes, the junior ranks, they often aspire to be a commissioner of police one day. I mean, because with anything that you're doing, you want to look ahead. You want to look at becoming the best that you could be in this organization. Of course, you want to attain a supervisory role. You want to, these kind of things.
Yeah.
So a lot of persons would have argued that, whilst I'm coming through the ranks, you're moving up, you're a constable, a corporal, a sergeant, you keep going up, you aspire to be the commissioner one day. And if it is that persons feel as though now that, there's a process now where somebody from the outside, external person could now come. Because in order to be a commissioner, you don't have to be a police officer. You could just apply.
Yeah.
So that when you see somebody external coming into the organization now to just more or less fill that vacancy, and you probably there all these years saying, I really want to be a commissioner, and then you just see somebody come and they, like mentally and the moral, sometimes they're a little bit demotivated because they feel as though, you know,
Yeah.
I've been here toiling all my life, I know the dynamics of the organization, and then you just put somebody there who never a police officer before, So,
Yeah.
I mean, it has its pros and its cons, but then sometimes when you look at it, sometimes somebody external, they may have a little bit more experience or, different ideas or suggestions to bring towards the organization that could cause it to, you know, be so much more advanced as compared to, what you
Yeah.
might be accustomed to, what you may know, you
Yeah.
know? So, yeah,
It's a challenge.
it
Um,
is, yeah.
let's go. Like, oh, let's move across to your work with, your philanthropy. What would you like? Okay, so your life is on the line. You're dealing with, you have a very complex customer service relationship. You're dealing with life and death, with
Yeah.
crime and violence. This is a heavy thing. How can a spiritual and moral guidance, let's say, provided by faith, provided by the church, influence ethical standards and integrity in police officers? Because of course, there is this perception of the corrupt police officer, of the police
Yeah.
officer becoming a criminal. What role is there for those ethical standards that, let's say, the church may have and put on police service members?
The church can be such an influential body on the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. However, to me, I have seen like very little interaction, you know, because and people want to get into religion and it doesn't matter. Once you have like a positive, impact or you preaching the right thing as it relates to integrity and these kind of things. I'm thinking whether it's whatever religion, you shouldn't let that be an issue because we're looking at the message that's being conveyed. And so the church needs to be an avenue where they are able to interact with persons and instill these values, because sometimes you could lose yourself, as I mentioned previously earlier on, in the interview here. You could lose yourself. And so the church now needs to be that bridge where they allow persons to understand the basis of, good morals, good values, integrity, how you treat with certain things. Even the church being influential in, as you mentioned, sometimes you might have like deaths, life and death, is shootings, there's so many things officers involved in. And, you probably would have been involved in a situation where you probably had to discharge your firearm or something. Or families could be the victim of a police involved shooting. And how now can we provide this assistance? The church could be that avenue for them, this safe place where they're able to come to, where they're able to converse, where they're able to feel safe and at home,
Yeah.
to provide that support to both officers and the civilians or persons who, would have been involved in these things. And so the church can be that influential body, but I
Yeah.
think that there's little interaction, and this definitely needs to be improved because if some persons really open up spiritually and they're able to see the importance or the impact that it can have on their life, I think they might be more open to accepting it, and they definitely see some form of change.
Yeah.
Because even the toughest officers sometimes you need that you definitely need that safe space.
Would you say that there is some sort of PTSD, like post-traumatic stress on police officers that witness, violence in general and police shootings on either side. Is there a lot of, is there,
Yeah, definitely. Because, sometimes you just see things replaying in your head. Sometimes you might just get in like a small accident or something, and it's like you're just seeing it. Like sometimes you just apprehend this, just comes over you. That was like a fear, or something happens. And so,
yeah, like,
every time it's almost like you relive the moments every time. Sometimes, you're just sitting down and like with anybody in a conversation, and then once the topic comes up, it brings back memories. And so there is this, the after effects, the stress, that kind of thing, the PTSD that they face these things. And so, as I said, you really need that support to really
yeah,
help you overcome this.
yeah. This
Like
is,
you
this is
really,
where faith could play a role, the church
yes,
structures, perhaps psychologists, or let's say mosques or temples or what have you not. It should
yes,
be more of this sort of interaction with the police unit.
yeah, yeah,
I think I agree with you 100% there, like
yeah,
100%. I have another question here for you. Like, it's a little slightly different question, but
sure,
I think we need to talk about it. So, COVID happened. There was a state of emergency with the lockdowns.
right.
Were there any changes in crime patterns during these times? And how did the police, let's say, respond to these shifts?
Yeah, so there definitely were changes as it relates to the COVID lockdown. Even
Yeah.
when we had the state of emergency, because it kind of gives the same idea to the lockdown. So hence the reason I mentioned it. And what you find now is that persons are not really able to go out there to commit these crimes. Because one of the first states of emergencies that we had, persons were, allowed to leave your house at a certain time. So
Yeah.
definitely now the amount of crimes that you would hear happening in the night in terms of shootings, in terms of all these home invasions and that kind of thing, it would have been reduced based on the statistics. However, with the COVID and all of that, whilst those crimes would have been reduced, you still have other crimes where there's domestic violence, high levels of domestic violence and rape cases and those kind of things, because persons are now home and they're not able to go anywhere. So that the type of crime then would have shifted. And so the police would have realized that, okay, there's definitely a high increase in these number of crimes. How are we going to treat it? They would have engaged in different workshops, different seminars, online stuff. They would have even invented the TTPS app where, you see something, you say something, you just log on, you're anonymous, you just go there, you log, you complain, something is happening, you hear something, like all these different channels they would have introduced so that persons now who are, you're probably at home, you're hearing something with your neighbor, apart
Mhm.
from just calling, you could engage in these things to bring forward the information towards the police officers. There would have been increased number of the social work, they had more work to do
Yeah.
because now the crimes would just change from, these things are external, it's happening in your house now. And you know, some people were scarred, and you really needed that support from the TTPS. Of course, we're here to provide that assistance towards the members of the public and, really allow them to have an interaction, meet with a counselor to talk about, what would have happened and, even prevent further crimes from taking place as it relates to, the persons who may have been a victim, you never know, with the same individual, that kind of thing. Domestic violence, a lot of times, you found that people they fighting, husband and wives, a lot of conflict and that kind of thing, taking place in the home now because I mean, I'm stuck here with that person. So you really don't have, much interaction with the outside, only like when you go to work. And then of course, with the COVID, they had like shift systems running in most organizations. Some organizations shut down completely, so it
Mhm.
was basically essentials. So like healthcare workers, the police officers, these people who are essential workers, they were the ones who actually, had to be on the line, the frontline workers,
Yeah.
there, so that, the other persons at home, domestic violence definitely increased and the police needed to intervene to see how best we could, lower those levels of crime and prevent it altogether. But it definitely was a challenge
Yeah.
because sometimes there are many, we have this thing called the dark figure of crime in criminology. And,
Yeah.
what it basically says, these are the number of crimes that just go unreported. So that it doesn't mean that it's not happening, but it just went unreported.
Yeah.
so that you wouldn't really, even men, like we talk about men throughout these times of the COVID. Sometimes, men, I think people tend to overlook and they feel as though men might be this tough figure, like so that they didn't really experience domestic violence. But that's still not true. Men, they go through a lot as well. So even during these times, we had to appeal to the men in particular. Sometimes something might be happening and they may feel as, oh, I don't want to report it because I don't want anybody to laugh at me, or I don't want anybody to look at me a particular type of way. And so, we had to urge them, speak out, let us know what is happening, so that it definitely was a switch in the crime, and you have to be able to adapt it to those people. Yeah.
Oh, God, I mean, talking about the police service, it sounds heavy, and I think that you guys don't get enough, just enough recognition for the work that you're doing. Everybody just comes down on police officers, and
Yeah.
blames you for everything. I mean, and just hearing from you in this entire conversation, I could tell that, one, you don't have probably enough resources. Two, there's the politics that has an effect. And then there's the underlying issues in Trinidad with unemployment and the economic situation affecting it,
Yeah.
the um, you know, lack of psychological help from trauma that may happen because of incidents. It just
Yeah.
seems like a lot. And and we've spoken for quite a bit right now. And I would have just one more question for you. And
So,
I think it's a great one to end it with. What is Gabrielle's, what is your, what has been your proudest moment since joining the TTPS? And what advice, let's say, would you give to young recruits entering the police service today?
so when I joined the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, there was quite a number of exams that you had to do in order to become a police officer, of course. And once you're successful, only then you'd be confirmed then. And so I would say initially, like when I had joined, I always strive or aim to be the best in everything that I do. I just want to put my best foot forward, that kind of way. So I told myself, you know what, I need to be valedictorian because all of that is also involved in the police structure of the service. So there's something called seniority, which is very important. So for example, if you and I train together and you got the number one and I got the number two, you're definitely senior to me. So I have to listen to whatever you say. So if you say go down the road there and do this, I have to listen. I don't have a choice. So that I told myself, you know what? I need to excel. I need to be on top. I need to. So, I mean, when I would have trained, we had like 5 different subject areas, which I would have been successful in my training, of course. And so I would have topped so that I was the valedictorian. And so, it really brought joy to both myself and my family members and everybody to know that, out of all these hundreds of persons, you entered that, you went through the training, you did your exams, and then you're successful. And for me, I had all the photos, you had everybody want to interview you and they want to, find out what's the secret.
Mm.
And, I just told them, you pray about it, you put your best foot forward, you really give it your all,
Yeah.
So it was like a really proud moment for me. And it also, of course, when you top these things, people, they just want to have an interview with you. They want you to be an inspiration to others, that kind of thing. I mean, I didn't think it would have go so far, just okay, I just thought I would have just been on top and that's it, and then, just move on. And no, but it really allowed me now to interact with persons who want to join the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And so I would have had, one-on-one interviews with some of them. And, what I basically told them, once you want to join the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, you must know that it's no easy job. It's not easy. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of interactions. Sometimes you interact with members of the public who may not always be as friendly or courteous or polite. Some of them might be disrespectful to you. Some of them may be rude to you. But it's important that, you remember your customer service, your qualities, your values, and what are you here to do? You need to keep these things at core, and you may be faced with different things that will question your integrity. And so, you always need to remember your values, as I mentioned, in order so as to avoid getting caught up and engaged in doing these things. So apart from, me telling them about, the demands of the service, it must be something that you love, something that you want to do, because then if it is, you're not, you don't find the passion for it, then you will find yourself in problems where you want to quit and you just want to give up. Well, this is not for you. So that, anybody joining the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, I would advise them to just be prepared. It's definitely not a smooth, sail. It's definitely going to be a rocky road, but you need to be prepared, put your best foot forward, and, just simply enjoy what you do.
Oh, that's nice. That's a nice message. And Gabrielle, I know that I'll be watching out and seeing what happens. Thank you very much. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank
Goodbye.
you for
No
having me
problem.
here. Have a good day. Thank you.